Aloha and welcome to Voices of Change, the HSFCU podcast, where we educate, build connections, and deepen relationships in the community. My name is Bunny Tanaka. I'm your host with Hawaii State Federal Credit Union. Today, we're really excited to have our guest, Micah Kane, CEO and President of Hawaii Community Foundation, and transitioning to the CEO of Parker Ranch. Welcome, Micah. When we were talking virtually a while back, you shared about growing up and your story of how your journey has shaped you to who you are today. So let's go pedal it back to growing up.
Yeah, well, I was raised primarily in Kailua. My mother passed away when I was very young, so my grandmother would come from Nanakuli during the weekdays. And so most of my childhood was in Kailua up through high school, but I spent a substantial amount of time in Nanakuli. In Kailua, it was very middle-class living. I had two parents that were, my father remarried, and both my step-parent and my father were public school teachers. So, middle-class living in Kailua, and we did well. But then I also spent a lot of time in Nanakuli with my grandmother, especially at the younger ages. And I think that's where a lot of my perspectives were developed. One, I was an outsider there, in a very Hawaiian community. I was a very fair, Hawaiian. And so, I wasn't really in the in-group. You build a sense of resilience, physical resilience many times. And also just seeing some of the challenges and inequities that was happening in those communities. And that really stuck with me throughout my career. I was very fortunate. I got into Kamehameha schools through the Indigent and Orphan program from the 4th grade. Graduated from Kamehameha, went to a Menlo College in Northern California, played some athletics there, and had a partial scholarship, but also was supported again by Kamehameha schools. If not for them, I wouldn't have been there, and if not for a university that really embraced, someone like me who had never gone to the mainland or to the continent, that small environment was very good for me. Came back with a business degree, ended up graduating from Manoa with MBA, and then went into the workforce. And so that was kind of my journey. But through all of that was, a lot of like events. Like I think the next big event in my life was when my father got sick at the age of 14. My dad was a very large Hawaiian man, very, very stern, raised you with a heavy hand, but was very compassionate. But after he got sick, he had a brain tumor. I mean, he changed, right? I mean, and it was really from that point that I started looking for, other guidance from people who, that I found interest in, or that could surround you with things that might help you be successful.
So I know there's a story about being on a boat. I remember you mentioned that, and just kind of a community of being on a boat, right?
Sure.
And how that experience really poured into your life.
Yeah, so my family had a commercial fishing business that operated out of Waianae Boat Harbor, and my grandmother was a very strict person, strict parent, and 2 naps a day.
No matter what.
Go too far from the house, and the escape was to somehow get on that boat. But it was a working boat, and it was a 22, 24-foot boat. We had multiple boats over my lifetime. 7 to 8 men on a boat from 6 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m. at night, out there trying to make a living, fishing. And if you want to get a education in human resources, you try to do it on an environment like that, where you're tested with natural, environmental, challenges, financial issues, in very tight quarters. And I learned a lot watching my uncle, who was the captain of that boat, manage men. 2 of my uncles couldn't read or write, so their whole, life was dependent on how we did. If we didn't do well, they got paid first.
Yeah.
The boat always got a share. And in order to stay on the boat, you needed to be relevant.
Yeah.
And so even as a young kid, I finally got on the boat at about the age of 8, and I never got off.
Okay.
And that's something that has really stuck with me my entire life. Just knowing that you just can't show up. You have to be relevant. You have to lean in. And I tell you, I think the best education I got was being on that boat.
Right, being in that situation, and knowing it's other people's livelihood, and you have to chip in, and you can't just cruise on the side, right? You have to work hard.
It was my first exposure to business as well. I mean, there was expenses, and you had to take care of your product. You had to take your product to market. I know the price of every species, at least that was sold at Tamura Market in Waianae.
Wow.
At that time. And, interesting, many of those prices haven't changed. It was expensive then.
Yeah.
It's expensive now. And you kind of, I think back about how did people afford to buy, back then. So, I think so much of my career and how I address challenges comes from those experiences.
From being on the boat.
Yeah.
There was another mentor in your life. Linda Lingle?
Oh yeah, I mean,
there were probably many.
She was like probably one of the most impactful people in my growth.
Yeah.
When you're one, she's an extremely passionate and strong leader, and I had the benefit of being, in quarters like this for, 4 straight years. There's no hiding, and following the 98 election, I was working for a Democratic organization, basically in the construction industry. It wasn't, welcome to be supporting a Republican. I was following her because of her leadership, not because she was a part of any one party. But when she lost in 98, the party was the reason why she lost. And so it was, part of her plan to, build a party that would be, of support to her next run, and that she could be proud of, and the things she stood for would be embedded into that effort. And so, I got to be a part of that journey, and she basically took me apart and put me back together in many ways.
Wow.
Very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
And it's not a job. I was the executive director of the Hawaii Republican Party, not a job that a lot of people was lining up to get or want, right? And so, and highly run by volunteers. And so, it's not like you can fire volunteers if they're not doing their job. And so it created a sense of responsibility to motivate and inspire and try to articulate a place that people would want to spend their time. And the better you did, the more of that you got. And she was just such a big part of my growth.
So I'm hearing all these pockets of community people that surrounded you and helped to develop who you are today. And so you've worked at Hawaii Community Foundation for a number of years. How many years has it been?
Well, I was on the board for 7 years prior to coming over to the dark side of management.
Okay. And
then I've been on the management side for 9 years. First as the COO and president for about a year and a half when Kelvin Taketa, my predecessor, was still there. And then he stepped down and they did a search, and then I became the CEO. So I've been the CEO for just almost a little over 9 years now. Yeah. So
lots of great work with Hawaii Community Foundation. So what motivates you to do that work? Can you articulate that?
First and foremost, it's the people I work with, to be honest. We have an amazing leadership board, a board that is very engaged and committed, and they act the behavior that they expect. And so it makes it really easy because I'm inspired by their leadership. Then I work with a really good group of people within our organization that is also inspiring. So I mean, I think I think right now when you get that, then you can take that any place, right? And so the bonus is really the work that organization gets to do, and the more capacity you build, the more better you can work together as a team, the more you're able to take on and get all of that good juju that you get when you get out there and try to take on challenges.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate to have been able to work there the past 9+ years.
Oh, well, so is Hawaii to have you in that position.
We have a good team.
Yeah. So is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Oh, everything.
Yeah.
I think, I think anytime you care about your life or your work or the people, you dwell on stuff, I'm not someone that lets decisions sit long. I like, I love to see people make their decisions, and I try to, at least to the extent I can. I mean, as a leader, you want to create an environment where people are making decisions just outside their authority, not within their authority. You want them to be in the gray, just outside, and you want them to be confident that you're going to stand with them when they're in the gray, and I think that's when you have the greatest impact and success. And most times when I stay up at night, it's when I have failed to make a call that's going to allow our team to do their work. And so I think, you build strategies to kind of get your head off those things. I've been doing a lot of, I sleep with a lot of like meditation, stuff going on to help you focus and get to bed. But yeah, I mean, those are usually the issues that keep me up at night, is when I'm not making a decision that's allowing our team to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and I think that's your ability to reflect and to care and have a conscience that, how can we make it better? So let's tap into a really big issue, housing. And you have some thoughts on that and the housing issues, the housing problems, and give us some hope, Micah.
Well, I think there's a lot of hope, because the system is broken, at its core. And I think, the crisis on Maui is giving us an opportunity to rebuild that whole system from the bottom. Over my entire career, this issue has intersected my life, and I've had the benefit on being on different sides of it, from advocacy in my early days at the Building Industry Association, when you really focused on policy, from a political perspective, and working with Governor Lingle, and working through kind of a political lens into that space, because housing was an issue back in the late 90s and early 2000s when she was running. And then actually as a developer, at the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and actually seeing what it takes to actually, plan, develop, and construct and marry that product with a family, and then at Kamehameha Schools, where we were a landowner, and then now at HCF as an advocate, and then now again at Parker Ranch, where, I'm basically serving much like a Campbell estate would as a landowner. So, I mean, I've developed a perspective, of what has occurred over the last 30 to 40 years in this market. And at its most core, what I believe has happened is that government has turned over the core responsibilities that they should be doing, which is building out major roads, water, sewer, and public facilities. And the risk of bearing that cost and the uncertainty of being able to do that has now been passed on to the private sector and ultimately to the homeowner. And so basically it's a double, triple taxation on a family, and that's why you're seeing these high costs. What we're starting to see now, thanks to quite frankly, our current governor, Governor Green, a lot of our mayors, Mayor Blangiardi, Mayor Bisson, Mayor Kawakami, and now Mayor Alameda, are both seeing the need for them to take back that responsibility, and therefore creating certainty for our communities on where, and that can really cut the housing prices in half. And the average price right now being over $1 million can get down to the mid 500s, where it's a price where the middle class can not only just survive, but actually thrive. And there's so many examples of what occurred back in the 50s and 60s that needs to occur today in order to bring affordability back, and it's starting to happen right now. So I have a lot of hope.
I love it. And so when we were talking earlier about the generations and passing that down, it can come back. We can
Absolutely.
do that.
I mean, more so in any other place in the country, owning a home is the number one way in which you can create wealth, just because so much of our capital is captured in real estate. And so, assuring that people can get into a home ownership position is really where you're going to see wealth creation happen. And I think we're going to have to really prioritize, which is happening now again, where government is starting to take back on that responsibility. We're going to have to stick with it for a period of time until we start to see the benefits of those investments. But I think we're starting to see it even in the legislature today. I think leaders like Chair Kyle Yamashita, who covers the House Finance Committee, even Senator Donovan Dela Cruz, I think you're seeing that they are starting to focus and support investments in the infrastructure space.
Yeah. So we have a new product, a 40-year mortgage product that, everybody can do a little bit, right? In order to help this huge crisis of housing and getting people, like-minded people, to band together to help people to become homeowners. I think it's so important. I think
just generally the credit union sector is uniquely positioned because they have such a deep reach into our community in understanding the financial health and well-being of such a large constituency of people. And so when you put a product out like that, it has significant impact on our ability to advance a lot of this work forward. I mean, I think what I hope to see more happen is a more array of product that you can inspire people to start to save a little bit more money, make sacrifices through financial literacy training, and start to engage in other programs so that they can put themselves in a position to buy a home. When you start looking at a constituency of 1,000 people in a geographic area who increases their credit rating by 50 points, you're talking about major purchasing power for that community. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars that not only can create a better product, but actually, create better communities. And I think we got to think in that aggregation if we expect to move the dial.
Yeah. No, I truly believe in that. And oftentimes people may not think just the value of the credit score and how it can make things happen for you.
Yeah. When we talked earlier, Bunny, we mentioned kind of an example of how, our community approached housing back in the 60s and 70s and what's doing now. And I think we talked about the example of Kailua, right?
Yes.
Where government actually invested. The pico of Kailua was Kailua Park, 50-acre park, right? And at the corner of that park sat a fire station. Next to the fire station sits a police station. Next to the police station sits a library. Next to the library, an elementary school. And then you had light commercial. You had some affordable housing. And then on the backside, you had Kailua Intermediate School. As you come down, in order to get there, you had to build Highway 61, which is known as Pali Highway. And then on the Mauka side, as you come down into Kailua, you'll see a very large water tank, massive water tank that was built to support the entire Kailua subdivision. And then in Aikahi, they did a massive wastewater treatment plant. You've never seen an investment like that since then. And that's what made Kailua so affordable.
Yep.
What you got later over time was little pockets of that peppered throughout our community. And so you got the park that 300-unit subdivision could afford. You got the road that 300 subdivision could afford. You got the water system that it could afford. So you had this really chop suey approach towards development. So when another partner wants to come in, they're not getting the scale of that investment, and they're paying 2-3 times what it typically costs. At the same time, when you make these big investments, you're telling the development community and you're telling community, this is where things are going to happen fast. And if you want to go try to develop someplace that's more pristine, where we're not investing, then it should be really hard. So when we talk about deregulation, you want to deregulate where spaces where you want things to move quickly, but where things are pristine and you want to maintain open space, and it gives the no-growth people a degree of certainty that we're not going to be creepaging into areas where we shouldn't be.
Yeah, when you brought up about that Kailua District Park and just the way the whole community was set up, that's like the blueprint. I mean,
think it
it's so
is.
smart,
Yeah,
right?
I think it is, and there's still opportunity. I think, Waiava in central Maui is still maintains a great opportunity. Kunia,
Yep.
another great opportunity. On the neighbor islands, there still is on the west side of Maui, and in central Maui, there's opportunities but government has to make those investments, and unfortunately, there's going to have to be trade-offs for government to do that.
So let's segue into what is your vision of a better Hawaii?
One where our people can thrive and not just survive. Where our economy is evolving with the needs of our world and not stagnant, dependent on a single economy. Where we are reaching into some of what makes us unique, I believe, is the host culture that was here and all of the cultures that came after. And the blending of that is really what the world will be 9-10 generations from now. So there's so much that we can give the world that we are not giving right now because we haven't tapped into that special place. And that's where I think our opportunity sits.
And you mentioned about leaders leading with skills and with heart and compassion, and how that can just make a way also for a better Hawaii.
Yeah, and I think it even starts with those of us who are part of companies and organizations. I mean, I think there's a lot of smart people in the world.
Yeah.
But I think what you start with is a person's attitude and are they coming to the table as a team player, whether you're an employee or a leader or anybody. I really don't care how much somebody knows until I know that they're a caring person.
Yeah.
And you need both, but and I believe that that's relevant to any place. And that's kind of what I was kind of getting at. And I think Hawaii has right now, a lot of leaders who are leaning in on a lot of these issues. And I think now's the time to move.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody who really wants to make a bigger impact in the community?
I mean, two things. I mean, and I think this is true for any place and anybody. I mean, the world is run by those who show up. And if you want to have an impact, you got to lean in, and it takes risk. You have to put reputational risk on the line. You have to make trade-offs and sacrifices to be there. And the more you show up, the more you'll have an opportunity to have an impact. And I think, being willing to be vulnerable, in those spaces, in lending to the things that you do know and you don't know, and knowing when you're leaning in, to step back and let people do things that might be better at it than you are.
Yeah.
And I guess that, I remember, Governor Lingle, one night when we were having a really tough time, I was, my hands were in my head, and I was like, just kind of like, why did I take this job? I mean, we just bought a house. Just got married. We had a baby, our first baby, and I wasn't seeing the North Star at that time. And when I got my hands out of my head, all the lights were out because it was kind of late that evening. And there was a saying that said, "Never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has."
Wow.
And I still have that, So it's
wow.
It's hard.
Yeah. I don't know. You just gave me chicken skin. Thank you.
You gotta believe that, though.
Yeah. You do.
Those ideas start from a few people, and it builds momentum. You're trying to get people on the horse, and when you realize there's no room for you on the horse anymore, that's success.
Wow, Micah, thank you so much. Is there anything? Oh, I know. I do want to talk a little bit about Parker Ranch and your next journey, your next phase in life. I'm super excited for you. I bet a lot of people are. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. My first 2 days, it's kind of a modified transition where we're giving the Hawaii Community Foundation. I'm very fortunate. Both boards are really collaborating in facilitating the transition, because the opportunity was a little earlier than I think we expected. And so, I'm spending 2 days in Waimea and 3 days at HCF.
Wow.
And once the board seats their next leader, then we'll completely flip full time. But I feel really honored to work with an organization that's got such a storied legacy, 200 years of history in Hawaii, and beautiful people, beautiful place. One thing that really inspired me was, I feel like the Paniolo's, and they are and have been recognized formally, and as recently as a month ago, as being the best in their craft in the world.
Wow.
And if you ask them, what is it that they tap into, it's that which we just talked about. It's this this native culture that started, because again, 200 years ago, the language was still strong, and the way in which they viewed their environment was still very Hawaiian. But if you go through history, you'll see how other cultures came in through immigration and through the plantation lifestyle. Many of them are ancestors, and you see that impact on their world as well, and how that helped them to be the best. And it's the only example that I can point to today where we transcended what was not here before contact, and we became the best at it. And we can talk about surfing. Hawaiians created surfing, so we should be the best at it, right? Things in the environment, they were amazing scientists, so we should be the best at it. But when you didn't have something here and we become the best at it, it shows that we can transfer that to other places. How do we bring it into our boardrooms at Hawaii State Federal Credit Union? How do we bring it to our boardroom at Hawaii Community Foundation? How do we integrate it into our government and how they practice their work? And how do we position Hawaii with that so that we can tap into that nobody else gets to tap into?
Correct.
And that's really, to me, what attracted me to Parker Ranch.
Oh, perfect. I think win-win for you and for them. And now I have to ask, wait, do you have a horse? Are you going to get a horse?
No,
okay.
No, I'm not. And I'm not planning to buy any cowboy boots or a cowboy hat. And, I'll let the Paneolos tell me when I'm worthy of that.
Okay.
I'm not going there to try to be anything other than, someone who's trying to help that place become what it can be.
Yeah.
Definitely not try to be a cowboy. I'd hurt myself.
Okay. Well, it's a beautiful place, and
absolutely.
And it's going to be a wonderful way of living, and I know that you'll be really missed here. And
I'll be around.
Okay.
So I won't disappear, and hopefully, the relevance that we try to create will make sense to see us around here sometime too.
Sounds good. Is there anything else you want to share with us, Micah?
I just want to thank you for what you folks are doing. I think you have a great leader in Andrew. Got to know him very well through the different conferences and different forums that we operate in. And I love the culture you guys are building and what you're doing and the outreach you guys are having into community. So just congratulations for that work, and I look forward to all that you folks are going to accomplish.
Thank you. Maybe see you in Waimea.
Absolutely. You guys are welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll love it.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate your time and sharing your insights and just really the hope for the future for generations to come about Hawaii.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Aloha.
Aloha.